Hey Crime Stoppers, how's it going? So I've been looking for a way to figure out how many records were pressed of a given release. And I've come up with something that I think gives us a ballpark figure. And what I've done is using Discogs and limited edition releases and extrapolating from those numbers. So to tell you what I mean here, so I come up with about 25 or so limited editions where there's a known quantity, where they make public, this is how many we pressed. And then you look and see how many people on Discogs claim to have it in their collection. And then you just do a percentage of that. And so this is what I came up with. So like, for example, um, the, the, the release with the fewest number of people claiming to have it in their collection is The Clash's self-titled from Drastic Plastic, cut by Kevin Gray that I talk about so much. There were 5,000 of those made, and there were 666 of those claimed to be in people's collections. And so that's 13.3% of the units pressed people claim in their collections on Discogs. And so, in other words, if you take what people claim, 666, and you multiply that by 7.5, you get the number of units pressed. So that's on one extreme. At the other extreme, you've got the Muffs self-titled, also on Drastic Plastic. There was, of the specific edition I have, the 500 of those were pressed, and 207 people claim to have that in their collection. So that's 41.4% of those that were pressed, people claim in their collection. So in other words, if you take what people claim is in their collection and you multiply it by 2.4, in this case, you'll get the number that was actually pressed. And both of those appear to be sold out. You can tell by there being so few available, and the ones that are available are way above retail. And so I did that for about 25 albums, and I totaled it all up. And so I got a total of 85,816 units that were actually pressed based on what the label said we pressed this many. And then people say that they have in their collection 19,254 of those. And so that's 22.4% of what was pressed people claim to be in their collection. And so if you take that number that people claim to have in their collection, you multiply it by 4.46, that's what you need to get the number actually pressed, okay? And so, no one should believe that is a hard and fast rule. It's going to vary by pressing, right? So like just those two extremes that I showed you right there, huge variation, but none of the ones I looked at had even half of the pressing, the total quantity pressed that people listed in their collection, okay? And so what I decided to do then is, like, let's say then that a probably somewhat reliable rule of thumb is that you take the number in Discogs that people say they have in their collection, multiply that by 4, and that's likely to be in the ballpark of what was actually pressed. Okay, so anyone who's into statistics out there, feel free to say, here's why that's problematic. A couple of things are on my mind. This is maybe a too small of a sample size. Maybe you need to get more of a range of genres, like maybe people who collect from this genre tend to put their stuff in Discogs more than people who collect from this other genre. Maybe older records tend to not be in Discogs as much as newer records. So there's reasons to believe that this might not be the most accurate number in the world, and that's fine. So I'm not trying to claim that I think that this 4.46 multiplier is the most accurate thing. But I'm gonna I do think that it's probably in the ballpark. I think there's probably some truth to that number, and so to be slightly on the conservative side, and just for simplicity's sake, I decided to look at how many people claim to have a bunch of different records in their collection and multiply that by 4 and see what that number is. And I tend to think that number might be in the ballpark of what was actually pressed. Okay, so I hope I didn't ramble too long about that. I know that numbers make people's eyes glaze over. So now, like, let's look at some actual pressing numbers. Okay, and so what got me curious about this is this jazz stuff, these recent jazz series, the acoustic sound series, and the Blue Note Classic series. And why I'm curious about those is that these are series that present themselves as being all analog. And as I go on and on about, that's what I dig. That's my ideal version of a record, is when it's all analog. And you see all analog a lot more in the jazz world, at least nowadays, than you do in the rock world, it seems to me. And I would love to sort of create a persuasive argument for labels to, like, here's why you should do this. It's because you sell a lot of records. All right, so let me just, I don't have these in great order here, but let's just look at a few of these, all right? So John Coltrane's Ballads from the Acoustic Sound series. Where is it? It's right here, John Coltrane. So people claim to have 4,341 of these in their collection, all right? And so that alone is pretty good when you think about it. And then when you take it, just take it only times 4, you come up with 17,364. All right. So they pressed and sold, it seems, something like 17,000 of these. And they sold them for like $35 a pop or so, 30, $35. The price has changed over time, so I'm not positive. But they could sell something like 17,000 of these, of this 60-year-old album. Okay? And that's just John Coltrane's Ballads. What else do we got here? We got A Love Supreme. You'd expect this to be the top seller, but it really isn't, at least the acoustic sounds version. The acoustic sounds version, 4,120 of these, so times 4, that's 16,400 of these. And then I looked in Discogs and added up what was probably sold by Target and Walmart. And so you can add another 10,000 or so, because as you might know, a version of this, the same mastering but a different pressing, so like cheaper pressing, cheaper cover, I believe, but from the same mastering, another 10,000 of these. So it's something like at least 25,000 of these have been made and sold of A Love Supreme, of another approximately 60-year-old album. But it's all analog. Its build is all analog. All right, Wayne Shorter, Speak No Evil. 4,298 people claim to have this in their collection, so that's the equivalent approximately of 17,192, if that times 4 multiplier is approximately correct. And then we've got Oliver Nelson, Blues and the Abstract Truth, 3,668, which means 14,672. Okay, so that's just jazz. Oh yeah, here's the top seller, at least from my collection, jazz. Art Blakey's Moanin'. 5,340 people claim to have this in their collection. That means times 4 is 21,360 of these things. $25 a pop, all analog mastering, slightly cheaper, pressing, a cheaper jacket, but still a good jacket, I think. They sold something like 21,000 of these. So, that's a lot of records, That's a lot of records. And so that's just the jazz world. And I had this hunch that there was something about jazz, right? That like jazz is just a popular genre in the vinyl world. So like, a lot of people who think of themselves as audiophiles are just way into jazz, and so like you combine those two things, you get the audiophile pressing, and it's a jazz album. Those are going to be your best sellers, right? And it's true. It's those numbers show that you can make and sell a lot of those. And so, but what about the rock world? Well, I got to looking, and so I looked at some records that are billed and sold as being all analog. Okay, so the r.e.m 25th anniversary reissue series. Okay, they changed the names, remastered audio from the original analog master, they say, for Out of Time. for Automatic for the People, for Out of Time. They say remastered from original analog masters. So these probably truly are all analog, cut by Chris Bellman. And what do they sell of these things? Well, for Out of Time, they sold, or people claim to have this in their collection 3,324 times. So that's the equivalent, probably, of 13,296 of these R.e.m. albums. And then Out of Time, I'm sorry, that was Out of Time. Automatic for the People, 7,903. So times 4, it's the equivalent of 31,000 albums. All right, 31,000 of these. They didn't have to record a new album. It's just they grabbed those tapes and cut a new disc from it and did a new pressing. 31,000 of these, all right, of R.e.m. And you might say, okay, well, hey, R.e.m.'s a big band, right? So what about some other band that's maybe not so big? Can they make and sell albums like that? Well, I looked at My Bloody Valentine. Is My Bloody Valentine bigger than R.e.m.? I don't know. You tell me. I don't really know. My guess would be R.e.m. is a bigger band, at least at their peak. Maybe My Bloody Valentine has had more staying power in terms of being able to sell. But so these are the most recent all analog reissues. They sold these. Well, Loveless, at least, you could only get in Europe for whatever reason. That's never been explained, from what I understand. People have talked about there's some kind of licensing thing. These other ones, I think you have been able to get in the U.S. So let's look at these. The Isn't Anything, the 2021 all analog Isn't Anything. On Discogs, people claim to have this 4,773 times. And so that means 19,092 of these. And then MBV. This one sold even better. MBV, 4,773 of these. That's the equivalent of 19,092 of these were made and sold. And then Loveless. This is the 2021 Loveless, all analog. 8,425 people claim to have this in their collection on Discogs. And so if it's accurate to say that if you multiply that times 4, that gets you approximately what the real number is, 33,700. 33,700 of these. And then if you add in the 2018 is when they put the first edition of this out, 4,317 people claim to have that in their collection. And so if that times 4 is 17,268, well, 17,000 plus 33,000, 50,000 of these in the last 4 years. They've made and sold 50,000 of these. And it's just, they advertise it as all analog, and people like me go nuts for it. So, like, this isn't just in my head, I think, is what I'm trying to say. This isn't, I'm not just thinking that, like, oh, maybe I'm just some weirdo and it's just me that likes all analog stuff. People like all analog stuff. They love it, and you can sell shitloads of records when you do it that way. Let me just give you a couple more examples. I decided to look at Minor Threat. I've heard Ian MacKaye talking, Minor Threat and Fugazi. Heard Ian MacKaye say a few times about Fugazi, if you add up all of the pressings and all the formats and everything over the years, that Fugazi has sold many millions of albums. So I just decided to look at just one album that I thought maybe this would be the biggest seller in on the Kill Taker. I don't even know. I just decided to look at that one particular one. And in the Kill Taker, this particular edition of it, this is the 2009 remaster, 5,205 people claim to have this in their collection. So over 20,000 people, so close to 21,000 of these have been made and sold. That's just in on the Kill Taker on vinyl. And then I thought, well, how about Minor Threat? This is this compilation of the early 7 inches, yeah? And this one's a little bit of a mess on Discogs. There's several different pressings and editions and stuff like that. And so I added up 3 different pressings. There's maybe more that should be included in this, but 3 different pressings of the Bob Weston remaster of this. That added up to 10,946 from 3 different pressings of this. Okay, so they probably have sold over 40,000 copies of this 40-year-old record. 40,000 copies. That just blows my mind. Oh, I forgot to mention from r.e.m. They put this 7-inch up. They reissued this 7-inch. 1,337 people claim to have this. Times 4 would be 5,348. They were able to make and sell something like 5,000 7-inches in 2021, 2022. Another one I got curious about. I should show you these other couple ones first. These numbers aren't quite as eye-popping, but when you consider that this had a Classic Records reissue, both of these, there's been so many reissues of this over the years, and in the last 20 years there's been super high quality reissues, but then the most recent Jeff Powell cut super high quality reissue, despite there being so much out there already on the market. #1 record 2454. That's the equivalent of 9,800, so almost 10,000 records. And then Radio City, about 5,000 records. Compared to those other ones, maybe that doesn't sound like a lot. I still think that's amazing. 2 more I got curious about. This isn't advertised as all analog, but I suspect it is. The most recent reissue of R.e.m by P.J. Harvey. 6,820 people claim to have this. That's possibly the equivalent of 27,280 just of R.e.m. Tens of thousands of records they can sell. And one last one I took a look at is Neil Young's Harvest. So Neil Young, he's another one who does all analog reissues and advertises them as such, with prominent stickering and stuff like that. And this is another one that's a mess on Discogs. And so I added up many different pressings of this that I looked, and all have the same mastering. And through various different represses, 13,308 people claim to have this in their collection, the equivalent of 53,232. Okay? You can sell 50,000 records of these in modern days. All right. So, I hope that didn't go. It probably went on for too long. I wanted to make this as interesting as possible. Let me try to sum this up by saying it's not just in my head. I love all analog records, and so do a lot of people. And so that was the method I came up for trying to sort of extrapolate what is the true number of records being pressed. And apparently, a lot of people are selling tens of thousands of records. A lot of groups, a lot of bands, even though it's old stuff. But you put stuff out in high quality, and people eat it right up. I would love it if people from record labels saw this. I'm under no illusions that people actually will. But there you have it. Analog sells. And there's ways to figure it out. I'd appreciate, too, if anyone out there knows more about stats than me. This was just the most intuitive way I could come up with to figure this out. If people out there know more about this than I do and have some suggestions about better ways to look at it, I'm all ears. But I do feel that my method is halfway decent, and that number of just in general taking it times 4 gets you in the ballpark. I think that's probably fairly accurate. But let me know if you disagree. Let me know if you see it a different way. Let me know if you come up with another method that comes up with a different number. Okay, that was a long one. Getting self-conscious about how long I went. Thanks so much for watching. So long.